Hello, my name is Johnathan Hendricks. I was born in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and parents are Brian and Jean Hendricks. I was born in 1982. I'm doing this documentary to talk about my time in the military. I graduated in the year 2000 at Stephen Argyle Central, and kind of just talk a little bit about why I went in the military, how it kind of came about, my time in the military, some good times, some not so good times. So why I decided to go into the Air Force. So I was actually on the couch one day. I was lying on the couch. I don't remember exactly what I was watching on TV, but the phone rang, and it was the Air Force recruiter. He is Staff Sergeant Greg Benner. At the time, he called me up. And he's just like, hey, Johnathan, like, what are you doing next week? I was like, oh, no, not a whole lot. He's like, well, your name came up on my list for a possible recruit, so I was wondering if you just wanted to come in and talk about some possibilities. I was like, yeah, why not? I talked to mom and dad, and they're just, they said, they're kind of surprised a little bit. But I went down to Grand Forks and talked to the recruiter, and this was my junior year in high school. So talked to him, talked about a guaranteed job. I wanted to be maintenance of some kind. And so I entered delayed enlistment, and I waited around for about a year for my last year of high school.
The delay enlistment, does that count with part of your time?
No, it does not.
Okay.
So your total active federal military service date, it does not count towards that date. So that date was still when I entered my enlistment. It counts for something. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember what it counts for, but it allowed me for the Air Force to look for the job that I was looking for, that I had requested. It guaranteed, like I said, guaranteed me a maintenance job, which ultimately I was working on B-1 bombers when I finally came in. But some people will enter and they'll be guaranteed to go fly, or they'll be guaranteed to go be security forces or something different. I wanted to work on planes, so that's what I decided to do. But anyway, he called me up and, like I said, entered delayed enlistment and graduated high school. Worked at Teresa and Eugene's over at the dairy bar for a couple of months. Worked as much as I could, help them out, and then finally August 22nd came, and I had to leave and go down to basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
How'd you get there?
How did I get there? Oh, yeah, of course. So I had to go down to Fargo, to their MEP station, and flew out of Hector International down to San Antonio.
Is that where you were inducted, swore in?
Yes, yeah, at their center down there in Fargo. 'Cause at the time, maybe even today, Grand Forks didn't have one, so thanks for the.
Did you know anybody else?
Did I know anybody? No, I didn't know any of the other. Oh, jeez, 20. I don't remember the number. 20-some people. We all got on the plane. No idea who they were.
Okay.
So got off the bus, and of course, getting screamed at a whole lot. So that was a little fun, but we all knew it was going to happen. Going into the military, no matter what branch it is, you get off the bus, you're getting yelled at, do this, do that, unpack your things. So, but overall, I remember some things about basic training, but overall they teach you, how to get organized, how to be, how to think, I don't know, I can't think of the word right now, more structured, and be ultimately a better person. But I learned a lot in basic training, teamwork. There is only one person that I still kind of sort of keep contact with from my basic training squad.
So in basic training, was there, there was a lot of classroom stuff, I'm sure, but was there physical, PT?
Yeah, every morning we'd get up at 5 o'clock to reveille, and we'd go run 2-3 miles. We'd do core exercises, calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, all that type of stuff. Probably wasn't as hardcore as the Army or the Marines or anything like that, but There were a lot of classroom academics, things like that.
So did you qualify with weapons at all?
In basic training, we did shoot the M16 there. Actually, yeah, we did. I did. I actually, now that I remember, I did get marksman, but that was the only time I shot the M16. None of my other jobs required me to shoot that type of weapon, so it was the only time I shot the M16.
And did the Air Force have like bring you through tear gas or anything like that?
No, no. I did not go through a tear gas chamber. It'd be like, here's what this is like. Certain jobs in the Air Force do require that, but mine did not. So I didn't have to do that in basic training or any other time while I was in the military.
Okay.
So, but I graduated basic training in October. The last week I found out that I was going to be going down to Shepherd Air Force Base, or going up to Shepherd Air Force Base, and I was selected to go be a crew chief on B-1 bombers. I knew, as I stated earlier, I knew it was going to be maintenance, but I didn't know exactly what type of maintenance. So, but now I knew I was going to Shepherd Air Force Base for my technical school to go do maintenance on B-1s. At the time, I still didn't know where my final base was going to be. That's a little bit later. But tech school at Shepherd Air Force Base still pretty structured.
You say you went up to it. Did you take a bus or?
Yeah, I just took a bus up there. So Wichita Falls, Texas, San Antonio, Texas. They're still quite a ways away, but they weren't going to fly us, so we just took a bus. So still pretty structured in technical school. We would march around. Sometimes if we were on night shift doing all our learning, we didn't do a whole lot of marching because there's not a lot of people up at that time of the day or time of night, so we kind of just walked around everywhere. But so a lot of the people that I still know to this day, I met there in tech school. Still good friends with several people all over the United States, Maine, Missouri. Some live in Alabama, but some of my best friends to this day were developed there. So I guess I'll just kind of fast forward through tech school. We really didn't. We worked on some of the mock planes they had out there on the asphalt. Planes that have been worked on for, by people for 10 years.
What's a mock plane?
Oh, it's just there's no engines. Well, not a mock plane, but I mean it's an aircraft. A lot of the engines, the avionics, a lot of the systems are gone, but some of the
Is that a B-1 then, or?
It was an A-10 we were actually working on. We were.
Is that a Warthog?
Yeah, A-10 Warthog. So. We change a tire or something like that. Practice safety wiring, bolts on, things like that. Just general maintenance procedures of some of the stuff we would be doing. Didn't do anything like jet engines or anything like that, but basically just the general procedures of working on aircraft is what we went through at that tech school.
So what were the living quarters like?
Apartment style living. I had a roommate. Pretty small. No, you can't see it, but it's about the size of the kitchen I'm sitting in, and yeah, it's just everything you would need. It was cramped.
Was it like a barracks then, or?
I wouldn't. No, it wasn't like open bay barracks, like we had in basic training, where you'd have 60 people live in the same bay. But it was apartment style living. So, me, my roommate, and then next door to us would be two other people, and we'd all share the bathroom. And then of course further down the hall they had like a main bathroom for showers and stuff like that. But it wasn't too bad.
What's the food like?
Standard food, I guess. Standard like cafeteria like food. There's so many people at that base. Thousands of people would go through the dining facilities every day. It was the maintenance technical school for the Air Force, or one of the main ones. So.
Did you pull KP or anything like that?
Oh, geez, did I do that? No, I did not have to do that. I volunteered for other jobs, looking after the dorms, sweeping, vacuuming, mopping, that type of stuff. I wasn't at Shepherd Air Force Base long enough to be able to go off base. You had to be there for a really long time, to maybe I think it was probably a couple of months. We had certain phases to where your liberties were expanded little by little, and I only got to, there was 5 phases. I only got to phase 3, and I don't know. I didn't really care. I just wanted to get out of there and get to.
So during
get
this
to my
basic
base.
and everything, did you have a cell phone?
Oh,
Were
no.
you able to use a cell phone?
No, I didn't get my first cell phone of my life until I got to South Dakota. So my first base, permanent base. Yeah, no cell phones. It was receiving letters. That's all it was.
So what did your mom and dad think about being in the Air Force?
They were surprised at first, but I know they're happy that I did it. Since grandfather on my dad's side, Robert Hendricks, he was in the Army, and oh yeah, they were happy for me to go serve. Absolutely, and I was happy to go do it. It was something that I didn't think about all the time, but it was always an option. But it's something that when I talked to the recruiter, and the more and more I looked at it and thought about it, it's something that I really wanted to do. Oh, yeah.
So where'd you go after? How long were you there doing the maintenance?
I was only at Shepherd Air Force Base for a month and a half, 2 months. The tech school that I went through was one of the shorter ones, and so I found out there about halfway through where my first permanent duty station was going to be, because B1s, I found out I was going to be B1 maintenance, but they could only go to Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, or Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. So I got lucky because I wanted to go to South Dakota, so I got Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. So
A little closer to home?
it was closer to home. It was kind of nice to still kind of have that, because I ended up driving up to Stephen many times when I was stationed there during my 3.5 years there. But no, it's I've been to that area before as a kid. We went camping, but it was nice to go to someplace somewhat familiar.
What town is that close to?
Rapid City.
Rapid City.
Right
Oh,
by, yeah, it's about 5-10 miles east of Rapid City, give or take. So got there in February of 2001, and I ended up staying there for a few years doing maintenance on B-1 bombers.
a little cool when you got there, huh?
Yeah, so it was nice and cold. I got there, I knew absolutely nobody, so that was a lot of fun. Being single, no kids, so I'm not living in base housing. I'm not having the chance to go live off base, so I lived in the dorms. Ended up living in the dorms for a year and a half, but it was a lot of fun. Like a lot of those friends that I met down in Texas from my tech school, we all went to the same base, so it was good to see. Okay, so I did say I knew nobody. I did know a few people. Nobody else. Like everyone there was brand new. So
what were some of your duties there?
so at first, it was kind of orientation. Brand new to the maintenance career field. But as far as some of my duties, just general maintenance on the B-1 bomber. So a lot of the grunt work went to the new guys. So in the wintertime, de-icing the aircraft, it would always come to the new guys, which is kind of weird because it's not the easiest procedure to do, and there's a lot of steps involved. So, but anyway, it was one of the dirtier jobs because the cab was open, it wasn't enclosed, so de-icing fluid would get everywhere.
So
But
tell us a little bit about the B-1 bomber. I mean, that's one of the newer ones. So
yeah, it's at the time, yeah, it's getting pretty old now. They're thinking about replacing it, but yeah, B-1 bomber at that time was a pretty cool aircraft, newer than the B-52, which everybody knows about the B-52. We always had a rivalry with those guys on, of course, who was the best, but it was really neat to learn about that side of the airplanes, other than just walking through them during air shows and things like that. But some of the things I started out doing, changing tires, changing brakes, servicing oil, cleaning the aircraft too, which I really enjoyed in the wintertime because you'd have to go put it in a hangar and it would take a whole shift of 20 people, 8 hours to clean the aircraft, and it was a lot of fun.
Clean what? I mean, not just sweeping out. You must.
Oh, washing the exterior,
okay.
washing the exterior of the aircraft. After the washing's complete, you have to re-lube everything. All the landing gear, all that stuff needs to be re-greased. Oh yeah, but it was a lot of fun. We'd have water fights all the time, but we'd crank up the radio loud and just have a lot of fun. But while I was in Ellsworth, September 11th, 2001 happened. I still to this day remember exactly what I was doing that day. Still relatively new to the Air Force. Like I said, I got to Ellsworth February of 2001. Well, now fast forward to September 2001. I was on headset with I was launching out an aircraft for its morning sortie, training sortie. So the pilots came out, they did their walk around, and they went upstairs and started engines the aircraft, and then we started going through all our pre-flight checks, and I'm on headset downstairs, just monitoring everything, and the pilots radioed down to me. It's like, hey chief, we gotta shut down. So the B-1 was a little notorious for breaking down, having maintenance issues, but so he's like, hey, we gotta shut down. I was like, oh great. I was like, what broke now? He's like, no. It's like, we just got a radio call from our ops center. Like somebody just ran a jet into one of the World Trade Centers.
And you go, yeah, right.
That's not the exact words that I use. I guess I would start swearing here, but it's like, yeah, you gotta be kidding me. And he's like, no. So we went through our post-flight. We shut down. By that time, the whole flight line was shut down. Everybody was inside watching what was on the TV. And so I watched the replay happen. I was just like, oh, this is going to change things. At the time, we were, it was still ThreatCon, so the base immediately went into ThreatCon Delta. I didn't leave the base for 3-4 weeks. I lived in the dorms. I had no need to. I still remember some people that did live off base trying to get through the lines just to go to work, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. Easy, just sitting in line waiting. But yeah, it's 9/11. It changed everything. I didn't immediately go and deploy because I wasn't fully trained in everything, which I was kind of bummed about because I wanted to go somewhere new, some other country. So I stayed behind for training that we still did back here in the States, because even though the B-1 bombers deployed, the pilots that remained behind still need to train. So I was part of that team that stayed behind. Most of my friends, they stayed behind with me because they weren't fully trained up either. We kind of staggered coming to Ellsworth in the 2 or 3 month time frame. So
Because you just got there, right?
yeah, I was only 6 months or so into my training. There wasn't a set amount of time for training to be fully qualified in maintenance, but it takes longer than 6 months. So, but next time, the next deployment went to a different base, and then finally it came back to Ellsworth again. So I got to go to Oman, Thumb Rate Oman airfield there, and stayed there for just about 6 months.
Where was that?
Oman. It's it's the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula by Saudi Arabia, Kuwait.
So you were overseas,
Yemen.
okay.
Oh yeah. Went there for 6 months. Along with the B-1s, there were AWACS, which are surveillance aircraft, and there were also a bunch of fighters there, F-16s. Of course, there were tankers there too to keep the bombers and all the fighters in the air. But no, I was in Oman for 6 months, and all it was oh wow, we worked 13 days straight, and then we had 1 day off, which was fine because it made the days go by quick. 12
Could
hours.
you go anywhere?
Oh no, we lived in a 3 mile circle. Basically our life was the gym, work, more of the gym, and food. That's basically what we did. Watch movies here and there a little bit on the theater, but mostly just hung out, and our time off, we would just play cards or sleep pretty much.
Were they flying missions or
Oh yeah,
anything?
they were actively flying missions. We were loading the B-1s up with bombs, and they would come back empty. Sometimes they came back with a couple, or they came back full, but most of the time they came back empty. Whether it was the 500-pound gravity bombs, the 2,000-pound gravity bombs, or the JDAMs, which are guided by GPS, they would probably 90% of the time come back empty.
That's when they're carpet bombing? Is that...
Yeah, the gravity bombs would be carpet bombing. The ones that are GPS guided, they would just sit up high in the air, launch them all, and then they'd receive coordinates from the satellite, and the fins would direct them. The fins on the tail part of the bomb would direct them where to go, and they could just basically just drop them all and then just fly away.
So what's the distance on a B-1 bomber? Yeah, idea?
The range?
Yep.
I can't remember the exact range, but with air refueling, unlimited.
Unlimited, yeah.
Yeah. As long, I mean, it's obviously dictated by as long as a person can stay awake, and mechanical. But I've heard of pilots doing 20-hour sorties. Definitely. But obviously for that, a lot of those sorties are just to prove how long they could stay up. But more oftentimes than not, they drop their bombs and they're done. There's no need to come home, or no need to stay up in the air, so they just come home.
Mm-hmm.
But the typical sorties that they would stay up for while we were in Oman, because they would be flying to Iraq, or they would be flying to Afghanistan, would be about 5-6 hours. Some of the aircraft would sit up there, and they would just loiter up in the air, just do circles, and they'd wait for targets of opportunity that would be delivered by the AWACS that are doing ground surveillance, air surveillance, and then they would direct them in, give them the coordinates, and they go take care of their mission. The pilots, every once in a while, they come back, tell us some stories, dodging AAA rockets, missiles, stuff like that. There were a couple of times where the pilots would come off the aircraft and kiss the ground because there was a lot of targeted fire at them.
Were they shot at from the ground?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not being there, I can't corroborate that, but when a pilot comes down and thanks the Lord he's still walking, I usually tend to believe.
Something went on.
Yeah, I usually tend to believe him or her. So, but that was an eye-opening experience. Seeing the planes take off, come back, and I've mentioned the AWACS.
Mm-hmm.
They have a much bigger crew on the AWACS.
That's the one with the donut on top?
It is. It's the aircraft with the dome that rotates right above it. And so on the B-1s, it was nothing but there were 4 officers that were the crew. On AWACS, there were the officers. On the flight part of the crew, there were also officers that sat in the back of the airplane, the mission part of the crew. There was also enlisted aviators. So one of the days when I was there, I went over across the ramp and talked to some of those guys and what they did. One of them happened to be a flight engineer, and what he did. And flight engineer on the aircraft that fly now today, they monitor the systems in flight on more complex aircraft. I thought that sounded kind of cool, so that's where my interest first started, for me to decide to cross-train from maintenance to go to be an enlisted aviator. So I got back home from my deployment. I started the process of cross-training to be a flight engineer, not knowing what aircraft I'd be on.
Got home to
Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Okay.
To my permanent base. Started the process of going through my flight physical, getting all the paperwork done, to submit my application to be selected. So selected to cross-train. At a certain point during your first enlistment, there's a window. I can't remember what months they are, but
what's your rank now?
What's that?
What is your rank at this time?
Oh, at this time I was Airman First Class, so E3. E3?
E3?
Yeah. So I forget what months they are, but at at some point in time you can cross train and do anything else. It's one of the initiatives that the Air Force has to broaden your career, so stuff like that. So I put my application in and waited. You get 3
For
different...
pilot or?
Oh no, for flight engineer. And I waited to be selected. So the first board convened and I didn't hear anything. Well, I was like, what the heck is going on? So I called up the senior master sergeant that kind of directed all the crew chiefs. I'm like, what's going on? Like, how come I didn't get selected? So he's like, let me find out. Well, it turns out that the MPF, the military personnel flight, they never submitted my package because they lost it. So I was not too happy. So they resubmitted my package, and so at the time I had to give a special power of attorney to the senior master sergeant, the E8, because I heard that I was going to go deploy again, but this time to go to Diego Garcia, a little island in the Indian Ocean, just south of the equator. So I had to give him special power of attorney to handle all of my paperwork and sign for me while I was gone. So I did find out while I was in Diego Garcia that I did get selected to go be a flight engineer. So I was really excited about that. I finished out my deployment. It was only 4 months this time. Finished out my deployment, and I was just waiting and waiting to find out when I would leave. I knew that I was going to leave, just when. So I got from Diego Garcia, I got back to Ellsworth Air Force Base. About a month passed, and I found out that I was going to be leaving in a month. So this is March time frame of 2004. So I found out I was leaving in a month. I had to pack up all my stuff, put it in storage, tell my roommates at the time that I was like, oh, sorry. I was like, you can have to find a different roommate. And just waited to head to my new tech school to go be a flight engineer, which happened to be in Altus Air Force Base, Oklahoma. So that's where I started my cross training.
Okay. As flight engineer, so you're training to go on an AWACS then, or?
So at the time, I knew I was going to be a flight engineer. I didn't know on what airframe. It could have been a helicopter. It could have been a fixed wing. Just still didn't know. We could write down our preferences, write down our bases that we wanted to go to, and kind of just went from there. So I went through basic flight engineer school, which is about 3 months, learning how to monitor systems, what systems to monitor, how to do, basically just do a lot of paperwork and things like that involved in that job. But about halfway through that tech school, found out I was going to go to the C5 Galaxy at Travis Air Force Base. So
C5 Galaxy is?
The big plane that the Air Force has, opens up for both ends, able to carry...
Cargo carrier?
Cargo carrier, yes. Cargo and personnel carrier. So I was really happy because I wanted the C5, and again, I was happy twice over because I wanted Travis Air Force Base in California. So I continued on from basic flight engineer school to the C5 specific training, still at Altus, which altogether, my tech school training lasted about 9-10 months, which I ended up having to go to water survival training at the time in Florida. In there, I ended up having to go to survival and resistance training up in Washington State, so I got to do that in there. But ultimately, finished all my training for flight engineer, and I finally got to Travis Air Force Base in February of 2005. And that...
You must be getting to be a short timer pretty soon, huh?
What's that?
You must be getting to be a short timer, your time in?
I guess at that time, I've been in the Air Force for 5 years, so...
Oh, you must have re-enlisted then, huh?
Oh, yes. I did re-enlist right before I had to officially cross-train, because you needed to have for you to cross train, you had to have so many guaranteed years to get back. So yeah, funny story. I almost missed my reenlistment window. I kept asking military personnel flight. I'm like, I need to reenlist. I need to reenlist, and they're like, oh yeah, you'll do it later. And I almost was not able to reenlist because they're like, wait, how are you still doing all these technical schools? Like, you have no retainability in the Air Force. Like, you were separating in 4 months. Like, yeah, I keep making phone calls and no one tells me anything. Well, finally, finally the right person, and I had to do it like the day before I left for this tech school. And so with that behind me, yeah, I had reenlisted for another 4 years. So, but yeah, I finally got to Travis Air Force Base in February of 2005. And this job I quickly found was a lot different than my first job. Being a crew chief, I didn't really have to study. You just kind of showed up and did the work. But now, I quickly learned that I had to study to be a flight engineer, because there was a lot more detail, a lot more systems to learn, and if you wanted to be good at it and stay good and prove yourself, you had to know what the heck you were talking about. So I learned that pretty quick on my second training flight. And my instructor at the time was asking me questions, and I was just like, We were going through our pre-flight, and he's a bit of a hardcore instructor. He's not a nice person, but it did give me the wake-up call that I needed to start studying. So, but yeah, I pretty much studied my butt off, and a year later, so a whole nother year just of training, I became a fully qualified flight engineer, which I really I wanted to be good at it. I didn't.
How long did that take?
Another year. So
you did this training for a year?
Yeah. So it was a little over a year, because I remember my initial check ride in March of 2006, and I ended up getting one of the examiners. Everybody did not want to have him as their examiner, because he was a ball buster. Let's just put it that way. He asked just about every question you could possibly think of about that aircraft, and of course I didn't know them all, so I had to ask the rest of my crew, or look in the maintenance manuals, look in our flight manuals, and go and find the answer. But I did learn a lot. You should learn a lot on your first check ride. There's no way you should know everything, because you can't know everything in 1 year about that aircraft. It's just too much, it's too big. But
so after you get done with training,
so yeah, I'm a fully qualified flight engineer, and so after that they kind of basically leave you alone. You're considered what is a line flyer. Your job is to fly. So I would go fly a mission for 2 weeks, and we'd stop at various places in the United States or overseas, pick up cargo and people, and take them to our main spots were Iraq and Afghanistan. Because
what do they have for seats in these things? What did they have for seating? Was it web seats, or?
So they're very similar to airline seats, much more comfortable. They lean back a lot further, so it was good for the flight crew who would have 24-hour days.
How many would you put in there?
So for the crew, we'd have anywhere between 8 and 15 people, but we had a troop compartment in the back, not in the cargo. The C-5 carried troops up near the top of the plane, and they had the capacity for 73 people, and and all our equipment. So, but yeah, we would mostly ferry people and cargo to Iraq and Afghanistan and some of the other countries that are clustered around those two. At the time, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom were the two big operations going on. So our job was to support those troops, whether it be the Army, Marines, Navy on the ground, bringing in weapons, ammunition, supplies as well, and taking people in and bringing people out. That was
So were you in charge of the plane, being the
No.
engineer?
So typically, there's always a pilot in the command, usually the most qualified officers. They are ultimately in charge of the aircraft.
But you'd be
and
in charge of what's being loaded, right?
So no, not my job was not what was being loaded. Those would be in charge of that would be the loadmasters, another enlisted career field. So they would be in charge of the cargo getting on and off the aircraft. They would be in charge of the troops getting on and off the aircraft and watching them while we're in flight. So my job specifically, I would sit right behind the pilots and monitor all the aircraft systems while we're in flight and on the ground.
Okay.
So all the fuel systems, the hydraulic systems, the firefighting capabilities, the engines, any kind of system you could think that an airplane would need, flight controls, all that. The flight engineer job was to monitor the aircraft systems in flight, and if something goes wrong, advise the pilots on what to do and how we can work around it to still land the aircraft safely.
Well, that kind of explains why you needed to train for a year. Yeah.
And really quick, the unofficial boldface for the pilots would be, "Hey, engineer, what do I do?" Which was kind of nice to know that the pilots, they would know most of the stuff that we would know, but they would still, they would want the book answer. They would want our expertise, especially the engineers who had been doing it for 5, 10, 15 years. It made us feel good that the pilots relied on us because we were the experts on the aircraft. In the C5 community, there are aircraft that do not have flight engineers. The pilots have to know a lot more. But it was good to know that they counted on us for things that would happen because, I think my 15, 16 years flying must have shut down 20, 30 engines at least.
Really?
For in-flight emergencies. Oh yeah. So, but the C5 is a safe aircraft. It was a very fun aircraft to fly in. It was good having a big crew. Typically, like I said, 8 to 15 people. I said earlier, but typically on a training mission. Well, any mission's a training mission because we'd always get new people. We'd always be training people. If you're not training on a mission, the squadron was not doing their job. But typically 4 pilots, 4 engineers, 4 loadmasters, and 2 maintenance crew chiefs that would come along. So it is a typical C5 crew. It got to be the bigger crew that you would have. It's just like, oh man, we have 15 people. But it was good because you got to meet more people in the squadron. And,
so how long did you do that?
So ultimately, I was a flight engineer for the bulk of my career, 16 years.
60. Well, how many years were you in?
So I just retired from the Air Force August 31st of 2001.
With?
21 years of service.
21 years. What's your rank now?
My rank, I finished as an E7, Master Sergeant, and I was perfectly content on that rank. Wasn't really wanting to do a lot of the extra work, political maneuvering that came with trying to obtain E8 and E9, at least where I was at. I just wanted to fly. And you don't really make rank just wanting to fly, at least in the C5 community where I was at. So I made Master Sergeant E7, and I was happy with that.
So how many miles, how many hours of flying time do you think you had?
So I ended up finishing with just under 6,000 hours of flying time. What that equates to in miles, I don't know.
What was the most exciting trip you had?
Oh, geez, the most exciting trip. It was probably my second or third year of flying. I wasn't quite an instructor yet, but I was fully qualified and got chose to go on a mission going around the world. And like the B1, the C5 is known to be kind of a maintenance nightmare, so it does break. So went on a trip around the world, starting in California, going and heading west. So we stopped in Hawaii, and I'm not going to know exactly what we broke for, in each of our stops, but stopped in Hawaii, and we spent about 3 or 4 days there because of a maintenance issue. And then our next stop was Guam, and we spent 3 or 4 days there. So we kept going, and then our next stop was in Thailand, and because I do remember why we were broke there. We had a firefighting detector loop in our wheel well that we can't fly without, so we were waiting on a new one to come in. And
We're out in Thailand.
oh, jeez.
That doesn't matter.
No, Pattaya was the city, but I can't remember the base right now. It escapes me. But we were there for about 3 or 4 days, and then we went down to Diego Garcia. We were stuck there for 3 days with a blown out tire, so we had to wait for a new tire to come in from Japan. So from Diego, went to Afghanistan, dropped off our cargo, and then went to Kuwait. Miraculously, we were broken again for about 5 days that time. We had an issue with one of our engines. Then we went to Spain. We were only there for a couple of days, just minor maintenance that needed to be worked on. Then headed over the Atlantic to stop at Dover, Delaware. Ended up being there for 6 days for a fuel cell, a fuel issue, and finally made it back to California. And so a trip around the world. Got to know the crew really well because we had a lot of times to go sightsee. One of my favorite missions, because not just braking, but because of the time spent with the crew. And I had plenty of missions where we were minimum ground time at each stop. The plane wouldn't break at all. That mission was definitely one of the exceptions, but it wasn't the sightseeing. It was the sightseeing, but first it was spending time with the crew that we were with. That's what I really enjoyed.
So in
during my 16 years of flying.
So in your 21 years in the service, is there anything you wish you'd have done different?
I'll put it this way. I absolutely 100% do not regret going in the military, going in the Air Force. I had a blast. I had several officers come up to me over the years like, why don't you become an officer? Because the Air Force does afford enlisted people to do that. And at the time I look back, it's not something at the time that I wanted to do. And still to this day, I'm proud of being the enlisted aviator that I was and the time that I spent as an enlisted member. But one thing I kind of maybe wish I would have done different is going to have some kind of a medical background. So maintenance on airplanes, over the years, I got burned out because I was flying so much. But it does transfer into the outside. Like you can become a pilot, or you can be a crew chief on aircraft for like FedEx, UPS, or you can be maintenance for those entities as well. But the opportunities aren't as prevalent. But I mentioned medical career, but that transfers everywhere. So if I could do everything all over again and kind of end up back where I'm in right now, maybe start in the medical career field to see what those opportunities would be. But what I did set me up to where I am now, and ultimately I wouldn't change anything because I had just such a great time. The people that I met, the job that I did at the time, doing it, the satisfaction of bringing the troops home and actually watching them, run to their families, or watching them have their big homecoming. One of the places we would drop troops off, El Paso, Texas, and they would always have everybody just sitting there waiting, kind of roped off once we would stop, and once they started deplaning the aircraft, seeing that was really nice to do that kind of thing for the Army, for the Air Force, for anybody who we were bringing home, whether it was military personnel or civilians.
Sounds like you made the most of your military career.
I did. I wanted to travel. I've been to over 90 countries. I flew everywhere. I didn't get to, to see every country the way that, if you're just a civilian tourist, I didn't get to see all the countries that way, but I definitely had my time in Europe, in Asia. Never did get to go to Antarctica, Australia, or South America. Those are the continents I can make to.
Well, now there's something to look forward to.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to go to Antarctica anytime soon, but.
So what are you doing now?
So yeah, now. So while I was in California, I did meet my wife while I was there. She was also in the same squadron. She was one of the loadmasters. Her name was Crystal. She's originally from Kansas. So I met her. Then we started going out, and soon realized that, hey, this is probably someone that I'm going to marry. So, so right now, as I have to look at my watch, August 19th, 2022, going on knowing her for 10 years. We got married August 20th of 2016, so it's my anniversary tomorrow. But, so no, met her, and now, so she grew up in Hays, Kansas. So she ended up doing 6 years in the Air Force and decided to get out. So while I was stationed in California, she decided to go through her schooling and stuff like that, and get her bachelor's degree as an accountant. So she's done work as being an accountant, and eventually she's now a realtor. And we have moved back to her hometown in Hays, Kansas, which is about 3.5 hours west of Kansas City. So back to your question of what I do now. So I had to do something after I got out of the military. That was a little bit of a transition. I know it's never perfectly smooth. There's a lot of people that get out and already have a job lined up. I did not. I had my retirement ceremony May 7th of 2021. And I had so much leave saved up, I did not get out of the military until August 31st of 2021. So I had just about 4 months of time off to figure out.
Well, you get to accumulate it, huh?
Yeah. I saved it up specifically to, you still get paid full rate that whole time. So saved up all my leave in the hopes of finding a job, getting some stuff done at the house. But right now, so in Hays, Kansas, they have Fort Hays State University. I work on the university with a company called Chartwells. They are contracted to do all of the food services on the university, whether it's catering, retail food, or the cafeteria. I started out as a supervisor at the cafeteria, and now I'm the director of McMinus Cafeteria at Fort Hays State. So I get to oversee all the operations there, and as my grandma would say, or my mom would say, I've kind of come full circle. My first job was working for Teresa and Eugene Kuzna at the dairy bar.
Grandpa and grandma?
Yeah, grandpa and grandma at the dairy bar. Growing up for 4 or 5 years there, and went into the military, and I'm back working with food again. So, but I like it. The people that I work with are a lot of fun. And the job's a lot of fun. So.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this interview, and thank you for your long and loyal service.
You are most welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. I did want to make one last thing. If anybody's watching this and they're deciding to go into the military, whether it's whatever branch of service it is, whether it's an officer, enlisted, maintenance, pilot, whatever, if it's something you're interested in, try it out. The benefits are good. You can get your schooling, they'll pay for your schooling, but it was a lot of fun. And like I said earlier, I wouldn't change anything. So if you're serious about it, try it out, and you might end up staying in for 21 years and retiring from the service.
Actually, you got a career in recruiting now, too.
Oh, yeah, I know, right? So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.